I'm here with top Los Angeles DUI defense lawyer John Murray. And John, I know that recently you've had a lot of success in representing clients who are diabetic, who got charged with DUI, and being able to show that their diabetes actually caused falsely high readings on the breath test machine. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. With diabetes, the person is constantly trying to keep their blood sugar at a normal level, and it's a constant fight for them sometimes. But what ends up happening with diabetes is the body can go into a state of ketoacidosis. So what happens when somebody goes into a state of ketoacidosis, their body actually makes isopropyl alcohol, and the breath test device is unable to distinguish between isopropyl alcohol and ethyl alcohol. So that's what gives you this artificially higher result. And a completely innocent person who is trying to be responsible with drinking. Because remember, Neil, it's not illegal to drink and drive. It's illegal to drink to such an extent that makes you illegal to drive or unsafe to drive, or your BAC level gets to a certain level. Again, in California, it's a 0.08 or greater. So what ends up happening is a completely sober, legal person can blow into one of these breath test devices, and he can have a result far and well above a 0.08, unfortunately, because of the contamination effects caused by diabetes.
So, for example, suppose that I'm diabetic and I go to dinner, I have a glass of wine, but I'm maybe truly a 0.01, 0.02 BAC,
Right.
still sober, perfectly fine to drive. It may be that my condition of diabetes causes this sort of alternate alcohol to be created that's read by the machine, and I get stopped on suspicion of DUI. I take one of these breath tests. It may read that I'm 0.13, 0.15, and I might get arrested when in reality I'm sober.
Yeah, well, it may not go as high as that. It could, depending upon how deep into ketoacidosis your body is at the time. But a lot of times, somebody who's a 0.02 driving legally, it could put them up just above the legal limit. I recently had a case like that where we actually went to trial and we won the trial, but that was one of the issues that we talked about, was this ketoacidosis and the effects of diabetes on these breath test devices.
So I'm assuming then that anybody who suffers from diabetes and gets arrested for DUI and took a breath test really needs to sit down with an attorney like yourself who understands how this works and get a sort of medical evaluation and see if in fact that did cause a falsely high reading, because if so, then hopefully the case could get reduced or dismissed.
Yes, and it's important to get their medical file so we can look at the entire medical history. And it's important for me to sit down with an expert witness. Usually it's a doctor who knows diabetes and how it works.
And who can explain this at a biological level to the jury.
Exactly right. And then you're going to also have to sit down with a forensic toxicologist too. I will have to do that and go through the effects of diabetes on the actual devices. Most forensic toxicologists are aware of this. There's a lot of literature that's talked about the diabetes and the effects on these breath test devices.
And just as a practical matter, that you use forensic toxicologists who used to work for the police departments or the sheriff's departments, right? And so
yes,
they sort of retired. Now they're kind of expert witnesses for the defense. So you'll have one of these people come in as an expert witness to the jury and the judge and basically explain how diabetes can in fact produce these falsely high readings.
Yes. The expert I use actually, he was actually with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department for many years, and the prosecutor used him as a witness. The prosecutor put him on and trusted him enough to go on and say things in their favor. So that's who I like to work with, yes.
So he has a lot of credibility, having worked on both sides.
Yes, tons of credibility and tons of experience. I've used them in trial. Like I said, my last trial, that was an issue that we talked about quite extensively. I was able to win the trial. But it's a fairly new type of argument that we're getting into, and it's a valid argument, and it's something that you need to get into and argue before a jury, try to get somebody who's completely innocent out of a DUI problem.
And so the take-home message for our viewers is, if you're diabetic, you got arrested for DUI, you believe that the reading on the breath test, it doesn't represent your true blood alcohol level, then you really need to be evaluated for this, because it may well be that you were innocent, that you were sober, and that it's your medical condition and not the alcohol that you drank that caused this reading.
Well, Neil, think about it. Think about how shocking it can be when you're actually trying to be a responsible person and you get stopped by an officer. You're going to be nervous. You know you're going to have alcohol in your breath. And then you go through the field sobriety test, and then you blow into one of these devices, and the officer says, wow, you're well above the legal limit. That's shocking to somebody. And at the same time, that person needs to get out there and get somebody to say, hey, there's a problem here. There's a disconnect between my field sobriety test and the numbers on these devices. And everyone's getting excited about these numbers on devices, even though they don't match up with my field sobriety test performance. And that's why when that happens, so you need to get an attorney who can go out there and explain these very, very technical issues that come up in these DUI cases with these very technical devices that are used.
And somebody who in particular has experience dealing with diabetes as a DUI defense.
Yes.